You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 568, the Roundtable discussion, the first ever that we've done on the Cantina Cast. Roundtable discussion of the Acolyte series. Now that it's over, we brought the entire crew together. I think Daz labeled this the Avengers Assemble. I've already called dibs on a couple of characters. I know Fred was interested in, who was it now?
Agent Coulson.
Agent Coulson of all people. That's not really a character, but thank you all for being here, and super excited to finally get everybody together like this and talk about it. This will be a roundtable, kind of a season series wrap-up. Couple questions. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this, but this is going to be it's going to be fun. There's a lot of opinions in this panel that we've assembled here today, and some of the opinions I don't even know what the answers are. I purposely have not probed and asked, and so it's going to be as much a surprise to me about some of these things as it will to all of you. But of course, with us as always, Jonesy, welcome to the show. Welcome to the roundtable, the first roundtable ever.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to have everybody in the house like at the same time. First time ever. First time doing a show with Ed and Fred, which is really exciting for me too. So glad you guys could be here as well. And of course, always the amazing Lauren. So this is pretty neat though. Glad we're able to do this. Lauren's
sporting. I hate to call you out, but you are sporting some new gear there. So Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really happy that we're all together. I was saying earlier we should do this more often, but I mean, I guess everybody will have to behave ourselves, and then we'll see if we get the privilege of doing it again.
Yeah, let's wait till see how the show goes first.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, and then we'll decide. Yeah,
making promises. Fred, welcome once again to the show. How's it going, man?
Good, man. And I'm excited to have the whole crew here and be part of it. And I'm really keen to see Lauren's thoughts on the Acolyte, because we have very similar loves of the Jedi and space wizards in general. So I'm excited to hear what she's got to say about this.
Yeah.
And I'm often agreeing with Fred. So
yeah.
Parts unknown, locations unknown. Welcome, Ed, to the show. Ed, how you doing, man?
No, I'm in Winnipeg, dude.
Oh, well, it was a wrestling reference.
Sorry. And it literally says Power 97.
I know, yeah.
The way the sun's setting with all like the forest fires in Canada, it kind of looks like Tatooine right now. So maybe I am.
Yeah, parts unknown. Could be. All right, well, let's get started. I don't want to. We can. Do you want to, Jonesy? Why don't you bring us through? I guess the pleasantries there, Patreon members and all.
Yeah, thanks to all of our Patreon members, especially now part of the tribe: Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn, and of course our top tier Delusions Granny members. Now this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Daz. CantinaCast.com/Patreon if you are curious to check that out. We've got tiers for audio, video, and even a chance to show up on or be on the show. So that's all pretty exciting. And if you're listening to this, we'd love for you to join a live stream, CantinaCast.com/YouTube. We'll bring you out here. You can subscribe, like the videos, comment so that we know you're out there. Also, leave us questions for the Acolyte so you can enter a giveaway for the Art of the High Republic. And Albert, I was thinking about this, the Art of the High Republic book. I was thinking about this. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw all the names for everybody that has participated throughout the series. That didn't win. I'm going to include them in there as well. So everybody who hasn't won has another chance to win. And then if you haven't left a comment yet, leave us a comment on YouTube, Patreon, Discord, wherever you want. We'll capture that and we'll make sure you're in the grand prize drawing.
Awesome. And just like that, Ed's back. Hey, welcome back. I was like, man, those fires are closer than we think they are. But good luck to everybody. And please send over those questions when you get a chance. Hopefully your name will be chosen and you'll get that lovely book we just threw up on there, Art of High Republic. Okay, let's get started. Let's jump into our questions. And the first question tonight, going into the series during the final hype episode, Jones and I talked about what our expectations were. And I think depending on where you are with your Star Wars fandom and kind of what you were looking for, either from the teasers that we got, the title, all the hype that came out for it, I think we all kind of went in with different sorts of expectations, some higher than, or maybe lower than others. But the first question is really about, thinking back to when this series first kicked off and what you were really most looking forward to and what you were most excited for, those expectations or those hopes, did this series deliver for you on a personal level? Jonesy, I'm going to start with you. What were your expectations going? What were you looking forward to the most, and how did it land now that it's all wrapped up?
One of the things I was looking forward to the most was going to be the exploration of the Sith and like how they were going to reemerge, what the play was going to be. I think some of those themes, and I think it more or less hit that. I think more often than not it did. It didn't go into as much detail as I was hoping for. When the articles and some of the interviews came out before the show started, they were saying, oh, we're going to explore this. What does it mean for the apprentice to look for an acolyte rather than master and apprentice, and some of that. And yeah, we got that, but not in the way that I was expecting, and probably not quite the way I was hoping for in that way. So it kind of met expectations, but also didn't, I think, as well. I think it also did a lot of foreshadowing and predicting and informing us of what's going to come in the prequels and the fall of the Jedi as we get towards the end of the prequels trilogy as well. So it did start to set some of that up. But so I think overall, kind of a mixed bag on expectations and whether it met them or not. And I'm not saying that was whether it was enjoyable or not, but from what I went into it, the murder mystery kind of evolved and changed pretty quickly. So I think that was another thing that didn't quite line up with maybe what they were telling us to expect. And then we'll talk about some things like Rashomon effect a little bit later on, but I think those are probably my initial thoughts there.
Yeah, I would agree. There was a number of things that came in a little bit lighter than we were thinking they would, and I think there were other things that came in heavier than we thought they were going. There were just things that no one was expecting, which is always kind of a nice bonus to have, which ended up happening. But Lauren, anything you want to add to that? Anything as far as expectations that were either met or weren't met?
Yeah, well, so going into the show for me, it kind of felt like a roller coaster because when the show was first started being talked about, I was very nervous about how the Jedi were going to be portrayed. And I was like, I don't want this narrative that the Jedi are completely corrupt and completely bad. But once the show started and I saw like, okay, the Jedi seem like good people that are doing their best, but they do have some flaws and make some mistakes. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I like where that's going. And I had this whole theory about Yord was going to be like portraying like the direction the Jedi were going to go in terms of like how they got more aggressive and all this stuff. I had all these things that I was thinking they were going to do. And then once everybody died, all of that went down the toilet. And then I was like, I don't know what is even going on now. So then my expectations were again kind of, well, that time they were ruined. So yeah, my expectations were all over the place. And then ultimately I kind of didn't know what to think. And then I kind of ended the show being like, okay, well, I guess at least it kind of came full circle in the end, but I didn't know what my expectations even were anymore by the time I got to the end of it.
Yeah, it was almost kind of a soft reset of sorts
right
halfway through that. And that's understandable. We'll get into all that here as well in just a bit. It was going to be Fred, but since Ed jumped out to cut in front of you, that's exactly what happened. We all know what he did there. But I'm going to go to Ed next. Ed, how are your expectations going in, and how are they coming out?
Yeah, I don't know. I was expecting like a whodunit mystery with some cool fighting scenes. That was really what I was expecting this. And maybe like also like a jumping off point for new fans. Cause you think of like where they are in the timeline. This is a place where they haven't explored yet. Right. Whereas like so much of other Star Wars stuff right now, it's like to have someone like start watching Ahsoka from season 1. It's like, you can't really do that. You have to watch like 10 other things. Whereas like, I was hoping this could be like here's just like this contained thing, and you can watch it. There's aliens and lightsabers, and here's a whodunit, and it's going to be fun. I don't know if it did any of that. Like, I don't know if the mystery was great. The fighting was really good. But like, I don't know if it was a really good jumping off point for new fans either.
Okay. Fred, but last one, expectations met on going into this one?
I try to keep expectations to a minimum with everything, like all the time. And before we even started watching the show, I said I was worried that the Jedi were going to be portrayed as corrupt and all that stuff. And I really liked the turn with Venestra near the end. Sort of, it's a good organization, but there are people within it that are using the sort of freedom that the Jedi tend to get to their own advantage. And I do wonder with that little fancy scene at the very end, if this is a systemic problem or if she's just a bad egg. But at the same time, remember in the Genndy Tartakovsky like hand animated versions when they introduced Grievous and there was Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, but a Jedi? Do you remember that guy?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I remember when I watched that, I was like, how did this guy become a Jedi when he's clearly afraid of everything? That's how I felt about Torben the entire time that guy was there. I didn't get it. And like Saul to me is what a Jedi is supposed to be. I want to see more of that. It felt probably like the most uneven Star Wars thing that I've seen, because there were episodes that were unbelievably incredible and scenes that I was totally jaw on the floor blown away with. And there was other parts where I was like, So my expectations were not met, same as Ed, because I wanted the same thing. I wanted this like almost Batman noir-esque murder mystery where a Jedi uncovers corruption within the Jedi Order kind of thing. And that is not what I got. The guy doing the investigating was part of the problem. Anyways, I'm going to stop talking. I'm sorry.
You're on mute.
Albert, we can't hear you.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Hey, look at that. Table that thought, because I think once we get into the what didn't work for us, which won't be next, we're going to get into the positive before we get into the maybe negative. But think about that too. Like, I do want to know, so get everybody's thoughts on where we feel like those inconsistencies were, because I think one of the feedback that I have is around that same thing. And my final score, which by the way, we're going to score this at the very end of the show. My final score, I think, kind of reflects that. It's not hugely crazy positive, but it's not negative either. But there was some inconsistencies, and I think I called them out. I think Jonesy called them out throughout the series. We've kind of been very candid about the things that we liked, the things that we didn't like, but try to work that in when we're talking about where stuff could have gone better. So as far as, I'll keep it really short. Honestly, I think my expectations were certainly met. I was looking forward to seeing more Sith and seeing more dark side, and I got that. I think the added bonus for me was Saul as a character, even with the even with how he was laid to rest, literally at the very end. All that considered, I thought he was a great character. He was very much in the image of Qui-Gon Jinn, but now almost to a fault, I guess, is now looking back on it. But I was not expecting to attach myself to him as clearly as that. It was a very nice and pleasant surprise. So I really enjoyed JJ's portrayal of Saul. But otherwise, yeah, I would say my expectations were met. I think most of us went in with lower expectations and didn't really try to blow things out of the water. Now, I will say this, after the first two episodes and having seen those in the theater before anybody else, oh my Lord, my expectations went like shot up to the roof. But when I look back of before that and what I was looking at seeing going in, I think I was pretty reasonable. So, all right, let's move into the second question. And this is really kind of, again, the positive. What did you enjoy most about the Acolyte? What were some of your favorite moments? What resonated with you? And then as the series was going on, as episodes were being released, was there anything that you were looking forward to week after week? Was it a particular character, a relationship, a theme that was touched upon, et cetera, et cetera? Lauren, I'll start with you. What was something that you were looking forward to here?
Well, I loved the characters. Like the first handful of episodes, I was so invested in the characters that was really what was making me excited about the show, because I loved them all in different ways. And I loved how the different characters kind of represented different aspects of the Order at this time. And I really enjoyed seeing that on the screen. So that was really cool. And I also just loved, just throughout the show, just getting to see some really cool lightsaber tricks and lightsaber fighting. That was just, I mean, that's always exciting when you get to see that. But yeah, I mean, even with all the bells and whistles, what really had me invested in the very beginning was the characters and just kind of just anticipating what their character arcs might look like is what was the most exciting for me.
Yeah. What about the High Republic era itself? I know you're, like all of us, huge fans of that era. Was that something that you at least went into expecting to be favorable? And I guess now looking back, I think I've made the comment, and I know Jonesy has as well, that it was kind of light in terms of like High Republic, and that's okay. We didn't need to have, every reference to every book that we had read so far. But do you feel like they did a good job of immersing you in that era? And I guess if you were to, I don't know, grade the High Republic content that you got, how did you feel about it?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised because I actually got more High Republic references than I was expecting, since I know that the show takes place several years after the High Republic books. So I didn't expect for, like, for example, the outfits to look so similar to the outfits on the covers of the books. So that was really exciting for me to actually see an on-screen version of that. But the era didn't feel like it still felt like a new kind of its own thing. It didn't feel so like the High Republic or so like the prequel era. It felt very much in between. So I really liked that. So, I mean, I was pretty happy with the way that the era was portrayed.
Yeah. Yeah. Ed, how about you? Favorite stuff going, now that when the series is going on, what did you enjoy most about it? And what were you looking forward to episode after episode?
I think I don't know, the part of the season I liked best was probably like the end of episode 4, as they were kind of like revealing the Sith to the Jedi, because they're still like, trying to investigate what was going on, what was happening with all this thing. Then like, they get caught off guard at the end of that episode, and they just get blown away by what's his name?
The Stranger.
The Stranger, I think it was Khmer. Then the next episode, it's just like we're gonna have a big fight the entire episode, and it's gonna be really cool. And yeah, I think that like that middle part of the season was kind of my favorite.
Yeah. Do you feel like it peaked there? Do you feel like it? Or do you
I think
feel
so.
like
I think it kind of tapered off. It was like, okay, cool. So he's the guy, and he kills everyone. All right, it's gonna slowly pick up the pieces. Is it gonna peak again? No, it's not. Okay.
Yeah. And I think honestly, like objectively here, I think what they were hoping at least, and maybe it fell flat on the execution or whatever, but I think for me personally, I'm kind of with you. Like I was expecting maybe the flashback, right? That when we finally got that second part of the flashback, that was going to be another peak, because we were finally going to get all these answers, and there were going to be big shocks and big reveals about what was going on. And while what we got was fine, I don't know that it blew anybody away. I think a lot of what we saw was kind of what we had already come to expect or suspected. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a bit when we were talking about the Ahsoka series, how like it would be like episode to set something up, then awesome, right? Then episode to set something up, then it kind of like faded out. Whereas like say Andor was kind of like the first 2 episodes were set something up that was awesome. 2 more set up episodes, awesome. Like it was just kind of like every 3rd episode was just like, we're going to peak again. Whereas like, I think both Ahsoka and this kind of fell flat for that second peak, right? We peaked in the middle, and then all of a sudden it's just like, we're going to trail off, and like, don't forget season 2's coming. Totally.
Yeah,
we're totally going to make it, because it's totally popular enough to have a second season.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like it did feel like there were some peaks and valleys, but with Andor, there was always an ascension there. Even though, you know what I'm saying, we were always kind of going up. And this one, for me, at the very end, until we got to the last episode and really in those kind of final moments before I felt like it really peaked yet again. But all great stuff there. Fred, going to you next. What did you think? What was going on with you as far as what you liked and what you enjoyed most about the series?
I think that it had one of my all-time top 5 favorite scenes in Star Wars, period. And that is episode 5, when it was tandem. They killed Jecki. The hardest thing, I was like, whoa, they're going all the way here. That's amazing. Great character. We shall miss her. But
yeah.
What a way to go. Fantastically done. And I'm a sucker for beautifully shot things. And the way that shot was done, she gets killed. Lightsabers go through her. She falls. There he is. Amazing. Like, it was just so perfectly done. And I think that sometimes we don't get enough beautiful Star Wars shots. And as dark and as horrible that was one of those perfect shots. That's like Darth Vader at the end of the hallway, the lightsaber going on. It's on that level. Maybe less iconic for us growing up with Darth Vader, but if someone's going in raw on either of those scenes, that was perfection. It was so good. Followed up by the Stranger and Saul having their fight, and when he does the Force push, that was like everything a Jedi is supposed to do. He's using the Force to defend himself, but he's not shying away like it's an aggressive defense. That scene, and the lightsabers fly, and Khmer flies, and he's just standing there, and then he whips out the lightsaber, and I'm like, oh my God, I was losing my mind. I totally get, like, I get very amped up when I watch this show, and I was losing it. I thought that was incredible, and that's because that was what was one of the biggest things about the show. That was like the consistency is it had such great peaks. You know, those two things were the things I enjoyed about the series as a whole the most. And maybe I'm not getting into the themes and whatnot, but like the cinematography on both of those scenes, especially when the stranger gets revealed. I thought that was like in Game of Thrones when Daenerys walks and the dragon wings are behind her. That level. It was incredible. I loved it.
Yeah, and I don't think we've talked enough about the technical aspects, and hopefully we'll have maybe more conversations either in tonight's episode or in future episodes as we release them, because we're not done talking about the Acolyte, of course. But Jonesy, I guess over to you. What worked for you this season?
Well, I mean, some of it's kind of a combination of what everyone else has been saying. So, like the chemistry between like Yord and Jackie and Soul, and of course the actors that brought them all to life. To Lauren's point, I think just worked really, really well. To where you enjoyed the interaction between them. The comedy relief was there. I was worried this series wouldn't have much comedy or much just things to keep it light, and I was actually really pleasantly surprised at that dynamic between Yord not having a shirt on, steaming his robe, and Jackie telling him to put his shirt on, and just generally what was going on there, I thought was really, really, really great.
Or the Chimera, I thought you were talking to him.
Oh no, Chimera can stay nude the entire time, I guess. We're write all the fanfic, right? So, but speaking of that, I think Manny Jacinto like rocked this role. I think he was great as Chimera, and then he was 10,000 times even better as the stranger. And I loved the dynamic that he had. He could just turn on a dime. Episodes 4 and 5, where we see, that change in the character, I thought was just really, really great, and just continue on throughout the rest of it. He didn't have as many speaking parts towards the last couple of episodes, but especially the last episode, I think. But when he did, it was really well delivered. I think he just knocked us out of the park. Fred and Ed mentioned this already too. The lightsaber fights were outstanding. I mean, episode 5 is probably going to go down as one of the best lightsaber fights in live action for Star Wars to date. Not an easy task to surpass or even be in the same sentence as like Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith. And everyone's going to have a varying opinion on that, but I think it's up there with that, with the brutality of the fight too, which was I was really happy they brought that in. While it was devastating to lose some of the characters, the way that we lost them, I think it was actually important to lose them in that way, to show the brutality of Chimera and just the rawness of the Sith. And we don't really have that in live. We haven't had that in live action. We had Vader snapping a neck in the Kenobi series, which caught us off guard there, and was very appropriate, I think. And here it was the exact same thing, and some of the dialogue that went from there too. And then the last thing I'll kind of touch on is the lore aspect of the show really was interesting, I think, in particular with like the witches. Now, they didn't explore it and get as far into it as I would have liked, but I really did like the idea. I've always loved the Night Sisters, which is surprising because I always thought I would dislike that because it was so contrary to Star Wars when they were introduced, at least from what we knew. But they expanded our ways of thinking about the Force and Force users in general so much that anytime we have something that's even tangentially connected to them, I get really interested and excited about it. And I think what they were doing on Brendok and the combination of the Virgins and bringing some of that into a canonized lore, or at least in a unique way, the evaporating in the thin air is black wisps of smoke, and some of the things they were talking about, while controversial in many ways, I'm kind of glad they were pushing the envelope in some of that space too, and flirting with some of these ideas that we hold sacred, and then kind of dialing it back a little bit from it. So there is a clear distinction between all of these different parts of the lore that we enjoy. But I was happy that there was stuff there for us to grab onto and build upon and think about and just discuss for the longer term. So those were the things. And I think what kept me week after week coming back, I really wanted to get back to the Sith angle of things, kind of like to my initial comments. So that's kind of what kept me coming back. I was really hoping to see all of that resolved, because I started getting kind of frustrated with Soul's, starting to tell and then not telling. I think it was like 4 or 5 times throughout the entire series where he had some stop starts there when he was going to actually say something, and then, something else happened. So I was really excited to get back to the Sith angle, though.
Yeah. I'll echo almost everything everybody said. Without going into too much detail on the other things, I would say the supporting characters turned out to be a bright light for me. Typically, we tend to focus on the main characters, and they tend to be above and beyond everybody else. And that wasn't necessarily the case for me on this one. I felt like Jackie and Yord and some of the other ancillary characters really had a lot of life in them. And I think earlier on when these episodes were coming out, I was praising how much I was enjoying the characters more than anything else. And that's always a win. That's always a win in anything you do with literature, movies, television, whatever it may be. If you're telling a story, you want good characters. That's what people are going to connect with the most before they get into all the other stuff. So I thought they did a really good job with that. One of the other bigger things, and I'll just kind of pick up where you left off, is really that exploration of the Force, whether it's the Force, the thread. We've got, so there were some bold things that were done here, things that we had never seen. And I like that that was done under the guidance of Pablo Hidalgo in the story group. And it was done under the guidance of Dave Filoni, right? This isn't someone who just said, "Ooh, I'm going to create this cool power," and it doesn't align with things that have already been said, or there's not a precedence, or it's not a natural extension of things that we've already seen. And that wasn't the case. Everything that we saw here was very plausible, things that we'd already seen in Legends, or just a slight different variation or a take on things that we've already set. That said, the intrigue, the mystique around the twins being born, right? The virgins, like you said, is it one? Is it two? How many were on that planet to begin with? Why were there? There were still a lot of black box kind of questions that didn't really get in the way of the story per se, but it was enough to keep us intrigued and wanting to know more and more, and feel like we were getting, again, more exploration of the Force, which is always a positive for me because we know how deep it can go. And especially with a lot of Legend stuff, it's great to see a lot of that canonized. I'll throw in the bleeding of the crystal as something as a highlight for me as well. Just being able to see that visually for the first time on live action. Yes, it was a different variation. I know there's a lot of debate still going on about how easy versus how difficult it could be, but you're getting lost in the details on that as far as I'm concerned. We got to see it, and we know now for a lot of people that have never watched or never read a comic book or don't know the background on how there is a red lightsaber, they now have at least some conceptual idea of what it goes through, right? Someone has to go through anger. Someone has to go through pain, a lot of emotions, and they literally transform a blue or green kyber crystal into red. And so that's a really good thing for a lot of people now. They have that in their kind of wheelhouse of knowledge in Star Wars. So they did a great job there. The other thing was the lightsaber combats. We'll get into that here in a little bit as well, but they're just all the combat scenes themselves. The hand-to-hand stuff was really great. The lightsaber combat was really great. I enjoyed Matrix Reloaded. I enjoyed the Matrix. Some of the shots that were done, I know they felt maybe not like as Star Wars, but they certainly were still like things that I really enjoyed seeing visually and for the first time in Star Wars. And I feel like, they've taken the Band-Aid off of that. So I welcome it. I'm not against new things being portrayed in Star Wars so long as they're done, as long as they're done in the spirit of Star Wars. And I felt like that certainly came about with some of the stuff that we saw during the fights. And then the last thing is just me week to week. I think it was Kamir. It was Manny Jacinto. I was, I had shifted my focus from May and Osha and the mystery and all that. I was like, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, but I'm not really excited about that. And even the Jedi, I was really concerned, like a lot of you guys, about whether or not the Jedi would be portrayed as bad guys. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I did feel like I was starting to lose interest. Like that became so secondary. I was more intrigued about what the Sith were doing. Why were they suddenly revealing themselves at this time? Who is Kamir's master? Is he the master? What does the mask mean? Look, oh my God, there's Cortosis. It was all of that was just so front and center, such a spotlight, such a highlight for me from that point on that I really didn't think about anything else. I wanted to see more and more of that. And I'll even say this, I know this is going to be controversial, but I like the relationship between Osha and Kamir. I want to see what that looks like when you have two people that are potentially passionately in love or in a relationship who are both on the dark side. What kind of damage can they do? Because we've never explored that, at least not in, canonically, but in Legends, there's all kinds of great, fun disasters that happen when two people are in love or in a relationship and go to the dark side. It's just a whole new ball game as far as I'm concerned. So, all right, let's move on let's go to the next question. And this one's going to be more about, I guess, the things that necessarily didn't work with this. I want to kind of put a focus too on the pacing of the episodes. It's something that we talked about a lot throughout this. And there was a lot of feedback that was going on back and forth. A lot of people were concerned after mostly after the third episode. I think everybody gave the first two a pass because, okay, it's the first two. We just started. Let's keep open-minded. And they did a pretty good job, I think, with the first two episodes. When we got to the third one, that's when things really started kind of falling apart around the fandom. And a lot of that was because we suddenly had the Rashomon effect. We had some things that were we were seeing on screen that weren't fully being described, things that were happening that didn't necessarily made sense. They would maybe come to make sense later for some folks. And people didn't want to wait. And we were thinking, how much longer do we have to wait? Well, it turns out we had to wait until episode 7 before we got some of those answers, right? So a lot of that created a lot of discussion around the pacing, not only of the episodes themselves, but of the series as a whole. Ed, if you're looking at this, how did you feel about the way the episodes were laid out? Do you think they would have, did you enjoy it? Could they have done something different? And is there anything else that you feel like you want to just kind of call out as being something that really didn't resonate with you throughout the series?
Is this where we complain how woke the show was? Is this...
Yes, please do that. I would love for you to do that.
Yeah, I like that they did the two separate, at least attempted the two separate flashbacks, right? Was that episode 3 and episode 7? And like you're saying, right? Like it was just a certain point of view in one episode, then all of a sudden they kind of fill in the blanks with everything that kind of really happened. I don't know. It's maybe some of it I liked. I liked how they kind of made you feel a certain way about Indra, about Carrie-Anne Moss's character. Like it was kind of like she was the one who was covering things up, but she covered it up for her team, right? Like you find out later, it's like, oh no, she isn't like this bad guy Jedi. She's like, I'm going to cover this huge mistake my team made because they had good intentions, but they completely failed. So we gotta cover this up for the good of, I don't know, the Jedi Order or whatever. But like, I don't know if they executed it well enough for me, right? Like it still felt like I could have used more a more different perspective, maybe a more witch's perspective in episode 7.
Did you feel it jarring though, the way the episodes were laid out, kind of bouncing back and forth like that?
I don't know how I would have done it differently. I liked the attempt, right? Because it was just kind of like you get the flashback in episode 3 and you're like, okay, is that it? Is that all we're getting from Carrie-Anne Moss? Is that why Torben, they're going to put him in like the old man makeup to put him in one episode looking young? Like what? I don't understand like why we're doing that. Okay, there's an entire other episode. We're doing this. Okay. And it kind of, they try to explain it, but I feel like it just didn't hit.
Yeah. Fred, what about you?
Okay. I'm going to use a weird grab here, but in radio broadcasting, there's a thing called forward momentum. And the idea with forward momentum is you tease something that's going to come up, but you don't tease something that's coming up in like an hour or in 45 minutes. You tease something that is coming up in 15 minutes. And the reason for that is your audience isn't going to care in an hour. They're going to care in 15 minutes. And I think what they tried to do was create this idea of mystery, and a big payoff is going to come along the lines at the very, very end. But by the time we got there, I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because I was like, as long as the Jedi aren't just incompetent, they're probably going to like give us a cool reveal at that point. It's like 6 episodes there. Nope, they're just incompetent. And it's like, that's not going to keep me hooked, man. So for me, that aspect of the pacing felt a little bit off. Again, credit them for trying, credit them for doing something. And it just because it didn't work for me doesn't mean it's not going to work for everybody else. I did feel that they had some great steak, but they were slicing it into little thin strips in one episode and then just giving you a plate full in another. And I didn't necessarily like that. But again, not everybody likes the steak. So what I thought was awesome, maybe not everybody's going to agree with. But if you're asking me for my take, I thought the pacing was a little bit wonky. And by the time I got the payoff on a lot of things, I didn't care. There was one thing, though, at the very, very end when Vanestra goes into the room and she's like talks about Master. Oh, was I hoping that was going to be Palpatine in some way, in some weird way. I was like, and I remember being like, oh, if it's Palpatine, that's so great. And I'm like, oh, come on. And then I was like so frustrated with that very grab. Cause like, that's the big, here's the payoff. And it's like, wah, wah. And I was so frustrated, but whatever. It's just because like there's some characters that like I hope to God are just good, that they're good. Why is that so bad? They've been good in every other thing you've seen them in, but guess what? They're not good.
They're
They were
not good.
all terrible all the time.
Yeah, that
well.
Vanessa Rose character. I don't know if
She was great. She was awesome.
I enjoyed her. What I was gonna. I think for a lot of people, and this is probably maybe feedback on the writing. I think they were trying to play that line of like, you never really know if she's good or bad, and you almost always think she's bad. And even to that very last moment when she's walking in and she says Master, I think they were really trying to play up this idea that, okay, this is like, here it is. It's going to be Plagueis, or she has been playing, both sides. And it turns out to be Yoda. I don't know that landed, at least in the circles that I run around in and stuff the feedback that I've gotten and talking with other people online. That seems to be kind of a lost thing, and so maybe they didn't hit it as hard as they needed to. But I definitely feel like it probably did fall flat for a lot of folks. But maybe not. Jonesy, I'm going to go to you. Did you enjoy the steak? As a bonus question, how do you take your steak?
Medium rare, because that's the only way to enjoy it.
That's right.
But, yeah, just to like the guys were saying, I think if I look at this for the Rashomon effect, I really like that they tried something new. I've said that several times now. Did we need both flashbacks? Probably could have done with just one, probably the second one that we got, episode 7, and with a few things sprinkled in it. But if I look at this series as a whole, and well, let me combine this with the Rashomon, because I've said this before as well. Like the series Arrow, for those that are familiar with the old CW series Arrow that follows the Green Arrow and his time like in the present, as well as flashbacks on the island when he is kind of cutting his teeth and learning who he is as a person and breaking down his life so he can become this hero of the future. That series has some similarities to what Acolyte was trying to do in some ways. And one of my critiques of that, I loved the back and forth. I loved those scenes. But when you get so many of them sometimes, or when you tease that you're going to get something eventually, and I love that Fred brought this up about the forward momentum, is that it would lose that because it would take forever to actually get to draw one of those storylines forward and actually deliver the payoff to wherever, like sometimes you even forget what's going on. Now, network TV, 22 episodes, 24 episodes, not the same thing here. But I was thinking about that a lot, and so I'm glad I have a word to put to it now, because I just felt like with Soul teasing that, hey, I'm going to tell you now, Osha, and then getting stunned or being distracted or whatever it was doing a lot of that. And we could have told all 8 of these episodes probably in 5 or 6 to tell the story that we got. Now, I would have loved for them to fill all 8 with a little bit more that wasn't as kind of herky-jerky between them. I'm okay with flashing forward and backwards a little bit, but I think for where we were getting, it didn't seem to know, like I didn't know when we were going to go back to the Sith, when we were going to get the actual pushing of the story forward for the Jedi. So it was a little bit of unknown what to expect every week. There's a certain element of interest in that, but if you don't know what to expect sometimes, that can bring fatigue. And I was a little surprised that I was having fatigue with just an 8-episode series or season like this. I wouldn't have thought that would have been possible, but I started to get a little of that fatigue to where, like Fred was saying, I just started to not care about the story and the actual truth anymore, because it was like, okay, I could probably pencil it down and be 80-90% accurate and just be done with it, right? So that part was a little frustrating, and I just wish that would have been a little more coherent, a little clearer, and just maybe a little more straightforward, which is really surprising with really how straightforward the storytelling tends to be in Star Wars, and this included. When they tell you something, they're usually going to give it to you. But here we wanted to tease it like it was some big reveal, when in the end it just wasn't.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to go off script just temporarily, though it is very related. I've seen a lot of feedback too saying, hey, this series was not enough episodes. And of the episodes that we get, it felt like there was some really weird cuts, and some of them were too short. I think we talked about that as the episodes were going on. We definitely highlighted that as critiques, and we kind of said, well, wait till the very end of the series to see if that really kind of, did what they wanted to do. Now that we've seen it, Jonesy and the rest of I want to go around here. Do you feel like would the series have had more time to breathe, to use that proverbially, or would things have potentially been fixed had they done 12 episodes? And of the 12 episodes, they ran on an average of like 45 minutes, right? I don't want to go an hour because we never get that from Disney. But you think with more lengthier episodes and more episodes, do you think a lot of the feedback that we're talking about here in terms of pacing, story development, do you think that would have been resolved by going longer? You don't have to contextualize too much, but yeah, a quick yes or no from you, Jonesy.
If they wanted to land in the same place they ended in this series where if it's at the expectation that we end in the same place, then we did not need more episodes than this. We needed fewer. If we were going to end in the same place with still all of the other open-ended questions at the end of it, then there's no reason. I think the episodes were probably long enough. And I think 35 to 40 minutes is probably about right. I don't think we need 45 minutes to an hour. Would I want some of that? Sure, in some ways. But if they were going to keep teasing us and doing more of this, no, that seems like it would have been unnecessary for me.
So here, let me recontextualize that. A lot of feedback was at like, why is
Lauren,
Leslie?
Lauren, you're gonna have a really hard time answering this question by that.
Leslie Headland was going out and doing these interviews and explaining a lot of things that were happening on screen that we as viewers may not have picked up on. We were certainly talking about it. We may or may have thought about it, speculated on it, but she was doing a lot of that. And so a lot of the feedback was coming was like, hey, this is great. We love this. But at the same time, like, this is kind of atypical. This is a little unusual for this much context being given by the showrunner after the episodes. Why didn't they just put this in or find a way to kind of work it into the story? And that's where that whole, the idea and the feedback of, man, maybe these should have been longer. Maybe they should have been 45-minute episodes. Maybe there should have been a 12-episode season. Does that change anything for you?
No, actually it doesn't. I think some of the stuff she was contextualizing, you don't need for the story aspect of it to really enjoy it. They're useful for the people like us who want to get into the further details, but from an overall story arc and perspective, it didn't shift anything materially, I don't think.
Yeah. I know, Lauren, we haven't had a chance to talk to you about the pacing, but just quickly, yes or no, do you feel like were the number of episodes we got good? Would you have liked to see more, less, and the length of them?
Less. And as far as the contextualizing that Leslie Headland was doing, I mean, for me, like, once you put your creation out into the world, it's out into the world. People are going to think and interpret what they're going to do. And anything that the author says after something's out in the world doesn't have any effect on me, because now it's up to the audience to think what they're going to think. So I think less. I think there were times that I felt like we were just killing time as it was. So yeah, definitely less.
Yeah. Well, I got you real quick. Any thoughts, I guess, around the pacing itself? Did you have any issues with the pacing?
Yes, I did. So once everybody died, I really had a hard time caring, honestly. Like, I felt like everything that I was invested in, like the possible character arcs that we were going to see, and also the identity of the master, all of that was taken away in the span of like 15 minutes. And so after that, I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm here for anymore, because everything I cared about is gone. And when I cared about the characters and they were still alive, I didn't really care as much about like the intricacies of the pacing and like what wasn't lining up quite yet. Like, I didn't care, because I loved the characters so much that was pulling me through. And so once I lost all of that, I started noticing things that I typically wouldn't complain about and stuff like that. So, I mean, the pacing, I just immediately lost momentum at a certain point in the show. And the Rashomon effect, I also kind of had a hard time with too, because once it was revealed what happened, I was like, well, that wasn't such a big deal. I mean, it was a mission that went bad. Mistakes were made. There's no denying that. But I kind of understood where everybody was coming from and why everybody did the things that they did. So to me, it didn't really feel like that shocking of a reveal. So I didn't really know what I was here for at the end.
Yeah. Ed, how about you? Longer episodes, shorter episodes, and did we get enough?
More episodes. I want like a filler episode about like just like a side quest to a different planet where they teach one of them how to like fly a spaceship, and we just get like digging into like character development. Like, it has nothing to do with the plot. It's just like a superfluous, unnecessary episode, but we start caring about the characters more. Then we kill them in the next episode.
Oh my God.
Well, Star Wars has no shortage of those series and those episodes. But what about you, Fred?
I'm with Jonesy. Kill your darlings. Keep it short. Tight. Forward momentum. Keep it going. The Lauren bringing up the death of the characters. It was weird. I became way more invested once they were all dead. Like, I did. And in the sense that for me, my anchor was Saul. Like, Saul was my anchor. And I think the reason for that is, like, as I've gotten older, I've identified more with like the matriarch and the patriarch, the parentage type characters. the nurturer rather than the nurtured. You know what I mean? I've identified with that more, and I could just be like where I am in life and my viewpoint from a certain point of view. But when they all died, I was really like, how is Saul going to deal with their deaths? Because he's going to feel even guiltier for this mysterious thing that he may or may not have done. So I think that we could have cut a lot of stuff out. And I say that as somebody who just got notes from an editor this week about things to cut. You can find ways to cut things and still keep the story going forward, but kill your darlings. It's a cliche line with storytelling for a reason. Smart, streamlined, simple. I think we are so used to bloated storytelling these days that we've forgotten that you can build relationships efficiently in a very short period of time. I'm going to use a weird grab, but the movie RoboCop, okay? Murphy and Lewis don't even have 9 minutes of shared screen time before Murphy dies, but you never doubt the relationship with those characters because of the way it is executed and the way the story is told. You don't need more episodes to tell a great story with great relationships. You just need good writing. That's all you need. And this isn't me going, the writing on the show is terrible. I'm only bringing that up because it's possible to do more with less. It really is.
Well, and I think, and that might even speak to why Lauren had such like strong feelings, because I think you're right. I think when you look at like Yord and Jackie and the moments that they really had like 2 or 3 moments throughout those first several episodes, but they were really, really brief. And I like the word efficient too, but they had a lot of subtext to them to where you were invested, you knew something was there, but they didn't have to tell you everything that went into it either. And I think that really helped us form more of an attachment to some of those characters as well.
Yeah. I'll have to challenge you on the RoboCop analogy off air, not now, because we'll be in this forever.
Oh, thank goodness.
I love that movie. Sorry.
I can tell. I can already tell. I'm like, oh, this guy's like, he's a ringer for the show.
I think it was filmed in Houston, actually.
Was it really? Okay, let's stop it because you're going to get me interested. And we're going to be talking about RoboCop here. So let me just weigh in quickly on the pacing. I think I've been pretty candid about this. I love the idea of the Rashomon effect. I've always loved it. I've loved the movie. I love the way they did it in The Last Jedi. I've loved it done in other movies as well. It kind of fell flat on this one, and maybe not. So, I think it was 2 parts. One, it took too long to get there. 2, I felt like we needed maybe one additional aspect of it. I always like when there's 3 different versions, right? 1 side, 2 sides, and you get the final version. That's the big reveal kind of thing. We didn't necessarily get that with this series. Some of that is probably because we only had 8 episodes to do it in. So more on that in just a second. And then thirdly, I think the payoff when we finally got it, the reveals weren't as big or as bold or as exciting as I was hoping. Some of that is my own thing. It's probably just my headcanon. We talk about headcanon on the show a lot and how it's kind of detrimental if you really get caught up in it. And for this series, I think it was one of those that just didn't meet those expectations that I'd already set. But it wasn't necessarily bad. It just didn't have the big payoff. As far as the length, I don't know. You guys, if you've listened to the show, you probably already know where I'm going on this. I like longer episodes, and I do enjoy lots of exposition. I like the Monster of the Week episodes. I like hey, let's go learn how to fix an engine for 45 minutes, right? Here's how you dust and mop for 45 minutes, and characters are just talking. I like all that stuff, but I know I'm not in the majority there as well. So I'm actually a proponent of make the episodes longer. Give them more time. Give us more time with the characters. Give us the opportunity to have more of those kind of character moments. With like Jackie and Yord, like you talked about, give us an opportunity to care more about some of these characters. I know some of them I felt like I really was invested in because of those shorter moments that they had, or the small moments they had. But then others was like, well, there goes that person. That's cool, kind of thing. So I do want to quickly just go to the comments too. We've had a lot of people in. Thanks everybody for throwing up your comments and questions. I'm sorry I haven't got to them just yet, but I think. There was, let's see, the Crawling Chaos says the story is actually pretty short one when you think about it. He says, I think making people wait 4 weeks for an episode is too long. Rita Reborn says, I'm not sure that we needed flashbacks. Could have done it more like Arcane with all the past stuff up front. I've seen a lot of that feedback and criticism as well. Like just slam those episodes at the front, let us understand what happened in the past, and then roll into the present, if you will, and, to almost to kind of slingshot us into the series.
Well, let's
Yeah.
think about though. If they did that, you wouldn't have needed half the episodes you got at the
No,
second
you're right,
half,
because
right?
everything.
Right.
Yeah, you've already got all the answers to some of the stuff in there. Yeah.
Yep. That
One
tells
Up
you
versus-
everything you need to know about the efficiency of the series.
Yeah. One Up versus CPU says, I think by the time the reveals came out, everybody had already figured it out. I think, yeah, and some of that was, us talking. We talked about it a lot, about sometimes what you see is what you're going to get, and they were certainly signaling a lot of what we saw here.
So I think that one of the reasons we had figured it out was because it's very tropey to make the Jedi garbage and incompetent and doing things bad. And I think that they didn't go to that well directly, but they took a few extra steps, and that was the water that they got in the end. And it's just like, at this point, when I see Star Wars and there's Jedi in it and something's gone wrong, I'll just go, I bet a Jedi who is corrupt and bad is responsible for this. And I'm right probably like 75% of the time.
Yeah.
Which is sad. It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
I mean, it can be that way. It just doesn't need to be that way all the time.
Yep. Well, let's go to our next question here, and that's were the Jedi the bad guys? Unfortunately, we don't have time to listen, so we're going to go to the next question. No, I'm kidding. Fred,
I don't think we do have time.
we don't have time for this. I know. We're only going to let Fred and Lauren talk on this one. So, Fred, let's start with you. Were they the bad guys walking away from the series? And I want you to think about it. I want your answer from a couple perspectives. If you're new to Star Wars, new to the Jedi, and that you're walking away from the series, what's in your head versus someone who's been a long proponent of the Jedi like yourselves? Like, what are the different kind of flavors that people are walking away with this?
They're like the Keystone Cops of space magic is what they really are. Like, just like you can hear yakety sax whenever they're out there doing their thing. And it's so weird. Like, and then I was going through this phase where, like Saul is like Serpico. He's the only good one there, They're going to bring him down from the inside, which is weirdly that's kind of what ended up happening at the end. But no, I don't think they're the bad guys. And we don't really know, because that little scene at the end with Yoda, maybe it's really just one person is maniacally twisting things from the inside. I feel like I grew up thinking that the Jedi were like a Shaolin monk order of samurai. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's how I always viewed them when I was growing up. And now I keep getting this, they're actually just as garbage as everything else, and they're terrible. And it's the sense of dire hopelessness. And I find it really frustrating, because we live in a dark time, and it's frustrating that the things that we had that we could hang our hats on to be hopeful in keep getting taken away all the time. I watch a show and I'm supposed to think a corrupt politician, a senator from the Galactic Senate, which we've seen is garbage on many occasions, is the only guy who's speaking logic and reason in this setting. I don't think the Jedi are bad. There's clearly some good Jedi out there, but it's just, it's tiresome to me to always have the order be terrible. It's doable when you have a Jedi that's like a Jedi order that's trying to do good things, but there's one mole that's in there that is causing problems. That I don't really mind. And I think that they may be trying to hint that was the case, but at the same time, Torben, who mysteriously aged 4,000 years in a 9-year period or something, like, he is also a Yutz. And it's like, I don't know. It's like, can't the Jedi just be like rad for once? Can we see that? Like, can we see like Jedi out there doing cool things? I don't know.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of feelings, and I've said this many times. Like Saul is so good. Where are the other? Why is he the only good one who for some reason wants to go abduct children or something? And that's another argument entirely. We don't need to get into that. I always thought that I'm losing my mind. Lauren, you're up. I'm done.
Wait, because that's too one-sided here. I'm gonna ask Jonesy to chime in just quick, or go ahead, Ed. If you want, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because like Fred was disappointed because when you were a kid, the Jedi were just this altruistic, awesome entity. But isn't that like also when you're a kid, when you think of like adults and you think the adults know what they're doing? Then when you finally become an adult, you're like, none of you know. No, none of us know what we're doing. Okay,
But
good.
can't some people just know what they're doing? Like,
Go think of any workplace you've been in, and there are some people who absolutely know what they're doing, but a lot of them don't, and the ones that don't destroy everything else.
Yeah, they ruin everything. That's why we have lawyers. Okay, Lauren's holding up a copy of The Living Force.
That's all I have to
as
say.
a counterbalance to the comments and conversation we just had with Fred. Jonesy, okay, so I think we've got maybe one in yes, one in no. Where did you stand on this? And do you feel like they get it? I think that the objective here was to portray the Jedi as still the light of the galaxy. However, they are human, and as humans, we have an inherent ability to make mistakes and stick to those mistakes and repeat those mistakes. Does that spoil the image of the Jedi in your eyes?
Well, fundamentally it does, because we don't want them to be that way. So it is by default. I think I go back to before the series came out, we knew this was going to be the turn of the Jedi towards the path that we see them on the prequels. So I think for folks who felt surprised by the direction that we're going, I kind of point back to like, we kind of knew this was going to happen. This is what happens when we continue to revisit these same eras, and the things that people are really interested in are showing us the downfall of the Jedi, the cracks and all of those types of things. And for many people, those things really seem interesting, but it is, I'm hearing you guys and I'm with you. It's a little bit of fatigue at this point, to where like the living force that Lauren showed up feel like refreshing all of a sudden, that we can show the Jedi becoming more political and being more rigid and things like that. But then they have moments where they recognize that, because they have the self-awareness and the emotional intelligence, even if it takes a Qui-Gon to do it, but they take a step back and be able to say, you're right. We are not doing all of the things that we should be doing, and we should be getting out and to struggle with some of that, and then to find new paths and avenues to be able to, re-engage with the broader public and to feel more connected with the living force. Those seem to be, less exciting, interesting stories, right? Because there's not as much drama, I guess, or there's not as much, there's not enough tension within some of that stuff, when clearly there is, because the book is really good. So, but where the Jedi the bad guys? No, I mean, they made bad decisions, but this is something we've been touting for the entirety of the series, is that they're not evil, they're not the villains, they're making bad decisions, they're doing what they think is best in the moment, but what they're deciding to do is not what's best in the moment, but they're reacting emotionally and things like that, rather than trying to be more subjective about it. But I think the purpose of the series, though, is also to show you that while the Jedi are making these bad choices, do you understand the motivations of why they're doing it, that then leads you to the conclusion that they're not bad, but they're just not doing the things that they should be doing, right? So, and I think that's where I left it, because I can clearly see that. Is it executed as well? There's a lot of debate there, probably not, but I at least can see from that perspective that they're not trying to do wrong, and they're just reacting emotionally to some of this stuff, and then they continue to double down on some of their bad choices.
Yeah. I'm going to give Lauren the final word. Ed, is there anything else you want to add? Since I know you chimed in earlier, but
I was going to quote Zangief. Just because you're a bad guy doesn't mean you're a bad guy.
That is from Wreck-It Ralph, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. I'll take Jim J. Bullock for the block. That's a Hollywood Squares reference for anybody that's old. Hey, Lauren, you get the final word on this one. I just want to, in 30 minutes or less, did they end up being like the bad guys for you? How did you feel walking away? I know it was a huge concern going in. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I was very nervous going in, and I feel fine the way that it turned out. And I don't even know if that's what they intended, because when I got to the end of it, I was like, oh, they really didn't do anything that bad. Like, I understand why all of those choices were made, including Saul killing the witch that he thought was turning into a demon. Like, I get that. Like, I mean, I kind of feel like everything was pretty understandable in terms of, yeah, mistakes were made. I'm not saying mistakes weren't made, but I see why they were made. And I see kind of what the thought process was of what they were doing. And I do think that, yeah, the message that the Jedi are people who make mistakes. I'm okay with that, because to think that people won't make any mistakes at all in their journey of spiritual growth and transformation, which, I mean, the Jedi Order, I mean, it is people that are on a spiritual path. I expect there to be mistakes made along the way and lessons learned. So I'm okay with kind of everything that happened in terms of the way that the Jedi were portrayed. And I do think that it's nice. I mean, I definitely prefer stuff like the Living Force, where I think the Jedi are portrayed in a much more optimistic light, where in the Living Force, there are still some mistakes that they have to recognize, but I think the tone is much more optimistic. I definitely prefer that version of the story than a sort of negative, sort of pessimistic version of the story. But I didn't really have any major complaints in terms of how the Jedi looked at the end of it.
Yeah.
I think Vernestra is the one maybe exception. I would agree with all of that. I think Vernestra is the one that's like debatable for me, like how they portrayed her. I have a lot of conflict on that one.
That's hard to argue with, because I agree that, I mean, she is making the same mistakes, and that's not great. So
it's difficult. It's difficult to tell how sincere she is throughout the whole series as well. I think it almost seems like she's being condescending sometimes and intentionally misleading. And I don't know if, like, to your point, I think at the very beginning of the show, Albert, I don't know if that was intentional to try to be a red herring or lead us down a certain path with Vernestra to build intrigue. But to me, it just felt like a severe hard left for the character that we know, granted 100 years later, but still, it just didn't feel like that one just didn't quite feel right.
I feel that there could be an attempt to maybe have her be a character who sees the writing on the wall, who sees what's coming, and knows that if the Jedi are compromised in terms of their position of power within the galactic order of things, they won't be in a position to stop what's on the way. Yeah. And with her doing, for her, all that matters is that ultimate goal of protecting things in the long term. Maybe she sees a much bigger picture than we're being led to believe she sees, or maybe she is just terrible.
Something to tip the scales, right?
Something dark side. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, and I think that's how they left it, right? With her going to Yoda, we talked a lot about that, and whether or not that was, is she going in there to tell the truth? I think if you grew up with the character, say grew up, in other words, you've been around for Phase 1 and Phase 3 of the High Republic. You've read all her stories. You know her background. You know the integrity of her character. You know her as the person that told Elzar Mann, you did something terrible as a Jedi. You need to go confess to the High Republic. If you take it from that perspective, I think you walk away from that last scene thinking she's going to go talk to Yoda. She's going to say, here's the truth. Here's really what happened. And I'm just finding out about this myself. And I'm looking to you now for guidance on what we do next. Because to your point, Fred, this could disrupt the integrity, the good standing of the Jedi Order. It could be the fall of the Jedi Order in a lot of ways, because they will be vilified. They will be the bad guys in the eyes of the public. And that's what the ultimate goal is for Palpatine. He's trying to reach that later on when we get to the prequel trilogy, but there's a real possibility that this could happen now. I think when you look at it from that perspective, they definitely walk away as having made some bad mistakes, made some bad choices, but not necessarily the bad people. And I think for me, walking away with this, I know it was a fine line to walk, and it was kind of here and there at times, but I think I walked away pretty okay with how it ended. And I still have a lot of hope, honestly, and faith in Vernestra Rwoh to do the right thing, whatever that may be. I think that's probably backed up or fortified by some of the statements that I always forget her name. Rebecca, what's her last name?
Henderson.
Rebecca Henderson had made some comments after the series was over saying she's doing the best she can with the knowledge that she can. She will make this right, kind of thing. So again, it could just be the actress, talking from the character's perspective. She may not actually know anything, but I do feel more confident that is kind of the direction they're trying to go in there. All right. Any final thoughts on that topic? Because I know it's a hot one. We've been talking about a lot. Anybody want to add anything before we roll on to a more positive, or I guess more a fun question here? All right. I'm going to ask you to pick between Pip or Basil. All right. If you can only have one, you've got two on a bridge. Pip is on one bridge. Basil's on the other.
Well,
You've got,
that's even harder than okay.
and you've got to save only one of them, your soul.
That
And you can
wasn't
o-
in the notes.
I know it wasn't in the notes.
This is easy.
Yeah, and I'm just greasing you guys up here. And then after that, tell me who your favorite character was of the series. And I think I'm going. Let's start with Jonesy. Go ahead, sir.
Favorite character was Chimere, and it's definitely Pip every day, all day. Basil was weird and creeped me out.
That's not the. Didn't expect that. What was it about Chimere?
Yeah, and Manny Jacinto just brought him to life. But I think it's just the idea of like wanting an act, like what drives someone to want to. I don't know. I don't really care about what drives him there, but him trying to tempt, May and Osha, try to figure out what it means to try to attract an acolyte, so to speak. And I think just the way that the character was treated, all the physicality of it, the fighting as well. I mean, the lair, and I don't know, everything about I was really, again, I went into the series wanting to know about the Sith and where they are, where they're at in this moment, where they're in hiding. What do they do at this time? Do they just hang out and cook soup or whatever? But I just liked the character, and I thought the acting was really well done, and what he brought to the table of challenging, like the quips back to Soul. You killed the child, and you brought her here, and just cocking his head. It's just that back and forth that he had with some of the Jedi, and even challenging Osha as well. I just thought those were really great moments.
Yeah. Lauren, what about you? Pip or Basil, and who was your favorite character in the series?
Okay, so Basil, I would have liked more Pip, unfortunately.
You're saving Basil?
Well, I'm interpreting your question as which character would you rather have a plushie of?
Oh my goodness.
So
that's your take on it, but that's fine. Go on.
Yeah, so Basil.
Okay.
Favorite character is Yord. I like it that Yord is, I feel like there's a lot to him that I was hoping we would get to explore. I like it that he's a rules guy, but also is a little bit like trigger happy too. Like I love I feel like I just want to know his backstory. I want to know like what made him the way that he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely Yord, I would say.
Yeah, and we're going to get more on Kelnaka. There is the comic book series that's coming out. I think it's like 4 issues written by Kevin Scott. We'll learn more about his character, but you could argue with somebody like Yord or even Jucky, there's probably more story to be told there. And they certainly have. I mean, if you've been out on Twitter and social media and you saw what the fandom was like the first 4 or 5 episodes before they, bid it, there are definitely fan bases they're craving more from both of those characters. So good call out on Yord there. Ed, what about you? You can only save one of the cute guys. Which one are you saving? And, favorite character?
We're taking Pip. Like, I love me a funny droid in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right. Like that to me is like the best part. I was thinking about this, I don't know how long ago, about what always fell flat for me about the prequels is that you don't get enough R2D2 C3PO in the prequels. And they just, for me, kind of make their comedy duo just makes it for me for the original trilogy. I don't know who my favorite character is. Maybe it might actually be Pip. I kind of liked the relationship kind of between Mother Coral and Mother Anastasia, right there. Just kind of like, they was kind of playing good cop, bad cop kind of dealing.
Good parent, bad parent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mean parent, nice
the
parent.
Protector and go explore yourself.
Yeah. Go ask your mom. I already did. She told me to ask you. Fred, what about you?
Pip all the way. He's like the speak and spell I always wanted as a child. And Basil is like a terrible knockoff of Basil Exposition, and he is no great mouse detective. I did not like Basil at all. And every time he was on, I was like, and then they put like the subtitles of like speaking rodent, whatever it was. I don't know.
Tyrnell
like,
or whatever.
Tyrnell?
Like,
what was that?
Nobody cares. Like nobody cares. Like that's just a word they're throwing up there.
I'm the one person who
yeah,
cares.
yeah. I'm gonna learn that in university. It's gonna be an elective. I'm gonna take that. Favorite character, Saul, all the way. I love cool Jedi, and he was such a great character, and his whole devotion to forgiveness. You don't want to find her, you want revenge. That's everything I want to see. I loved him. He was fantastic. He was really great, and I'm sad the way it all ended for him as a character, but it was a great finality. Like when I mentioned Kill Your Darlings before, like that's how he had to go out. And right before she kills him, it's okay. Like he forgives her as his last act. That's fantastic. Oh, so good.
Yeah, I'm going with Pip as well. I don't. Basil he did kind of weird me out, and his motivations at times like were really questionable. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
you can really,
Uh-huh.
if you really think about it, you can come up with some plausible explanation as to why he was doing some of the things he did. But there was something about his little jump that was creepy too. But I think my favorite character was Soul as well. As much as I loved Kamir, and I've gone on and on about Kamir, I think Manny Jacinto brought a dynamic to that character that was necessary. And I had never seen him in anything. And I went back and watched clips of other stuff that he'd been in. And because people were talking about like, wow, this is a really stark difference from everything he's done prior to. And absolutely was the case. Like he's a fine actor. So I hope this is bigger and better things from him at this point forward. But yeah, I'm going to have to go with Saul. I mean, I'm going to bring it up, but I don't necessarily want to make this kind of one of the reasons, if that makes sense. The fact that JJ didn't speak English and that he had to learn how to just speak those languages and convey the emotion that he does it in some of the line delivery, which I thought is incredibly impressive. Credit to him, credit to his acting coaches, the voice coaches as well. But he does so much without saying anything. I still recall that one scene when he had come down and he had just spoken to May, and he gives us that 45 seconds of silence, and you can see him struggling with emotion, burying that emotion, compartmentalizing it, and then going about his way as a true Jedi would. That is very, very powerful acting from him. We got so many examples of that in this series. I just think he was great. And again, I don't like the fact that he died. I can understand the way he died. I like that he said, the way I interpreted was, it's okay. Like, go ahead, do what you need to do so that you can be at peace kind of thing, even though he wasn't thinking about what that ultimately would lead to. That very emotional scene was enough for me to go, yeah, I didn't like that he died, but I do appreciate his character even more because of the way he died. So, Jonesy, what about you on your final character? I guess Pip or what's his name? I already forgot the other stupid character's name. You're going to say Pip, and then who's your favorite character from
I
the
already
series?
answered this question, actually. So.
Did you really? Did we start with you?
Yes.
Oh, we did. I'm sorry.
We'll
I
go
was so
back
excited.
around.
Yeah, we'll go back
Right.
around. Did I
Yeah.
change your
Did
opinion at
anyone's
all
answer change? Yeah.
between Pip and Basil?
Soul's a great call out. I think overall, Soul's probably the most complete character in the series, so it makes a lot of sense. He's everyone's favorite.
Yeah. No one said Osha and May. I don't mind the character, but again, like I said earlier, like I really wasn't that vested in the character herself. I think the duality kind of
I got
in the way.
invested at the end. I really did. I got really invested in the very last episode.
Of which
when
character? Both or just
Osha.
one? Yeah,
Osha.
right.
Like I got really invested in Osha in the final episode of the series. It's like she's finally got agency. She's finally doing things. And I think maybe that they were trying to play the role of that she's afraid to take agency. She's afraid to do things. And that fear is what made it impossible for her to be a Jedi. Maybe that was an intentional choice, but dude, when she changes the lightsaber, like that last episode, like it was so inconsistent, this series.
Yeah.
But that was amazing. That was really good.
So more we'll touch on that in a little bit, because I think that's going to lend itself to some of the conversation we'll have looking ahead to season 2, if there is a season 2, because I think, now that you've removed that restriction of having 2 characters on screen and trying to understand who's who, what their motivations were, what the connection is, it sounds like that's going to be mitigated now going into season 2. And I think that's going to bode well for Osha's character, because we can just focus on her and really kind of get to know and love her as a dark side user.
I did love that they were using evil Pip as a way for you to know who was who. It's like, the red lights, it's
Red
evil
lights
Pip.
there.
Now we know it's May. Okay.
He's just reset to default factory settings. He's not
default is evil.
All right, Lauren, what was your favorite episode of the season and why?
Episode 2 was my favorite. Just building up the intrigue, getting to see the characters that I was here for, and just kind of getting to speculate on where their stories could be going. Episode 2 is probably when I was the most hopeful and excited about this show, was at the end of episode 2.
Yeah.
And that first confrontation with Soul and May and Yord, that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot happened in episode 2, and the fact that they left that for a lot of people that got to see the first 2 episodes was pretty smart, honestly, because there was a lot of discussion at that point talking about what could come next, and they had certainly given us a lot to discuss there. So, Ed, what about you? Favorite episode?
I mentioned it earlier, just kind of like from the end of episode 4 through episode 5 with all like just the fighting and like, hey, no, here we are. We're just throwing down right now. And it just, to me, it never kind of gets better. And that kind of almost, the show doesn't recover from episode 5. Everything after, it's just kind of like, all right, cool. You did the best
everyone was
thing
dead.
Already.
Because everyone was dead.
There was no resurrection.
Then we're gonna go to the past to show all the other people who we killed how they died or whatever.
Yeah. How about you, Ed? Fred. Sorry. Next.
Okay. I'm gonna say the finale. I really did enjoy the finale. I thought the finale had the most plot development. I thought it was the most complete episode of the whole series. I saw just in that finale, we talked about the force block, all that stuff. Pelagius rubbing up on the rocks. Exactly. Big fan. That's one of my fetishes. But it felt like the finale finally gave us all the payoff and also threw stuff onto the plate. It was like getting like the wood plate panel with the meats and the cheeses. What's that called again?
Charcuterie.
Yeah, it was a charcuterie of an episode is what it was. But it was like a charcuterie board that mysteriously comes with too much cheese because that's what you want. And there's never enough cheese. And I don't mean cheese in the metaphoric cheese. I mean literal cheese. There's never enough. But this episode had all the cheese, all the good stuff. It was fantastic. And I loved it. And I am frustrated that idea of like leave on the high note. George Costanza did it. They gave us the good stuff and then they pulled the trigger and then they were out.
They're out. Yep. No, I'd agree there. I'll keep it short. Night was my favorite episode 5, for all the reasons we've already talked about. It's just action packed. It felt like one long lightsaber fight. I still think they probably, could have put those 2 episodes together. 4 and 5, it felt like it was really one episode that was cut in 2, but the fact that we got as much action as we did on the back end of that, and the action that we got was so enthralling. The reveal, I was on and on about that on this show. I was on and on about that on Twitter, but the way her body just slides over slowly and slumps to the ground, and then that's how we got the reveal for Camille. I mean, that is top tier epic drama. We'll never forget that. It's definitely one of those moments that we'll be talking about for years. So, Jonesy, favorite episode and why?
Yeah, I really wanted to, I really thought long and hard about episode 8 because there were a lot of good moments in there, but also I think in the end, limited for me was that they just offered too much at the very end to where not as much of it was wrapped up. So I went back to Night as well, episode 5. It's, like I said, I mean, this is what the purest sense of what Star Wars was exciting for a lot of us that grew up with the original trilogy and even with the prequel trilogy is this Jedi being kind of badasses and fighting the Sith and just, good versus evil and just having it out in the scenery, the cinematography, the choreography, everything was just so much fun. And the deaths were brutal, but also oddly appropriate. The reveal for Chimera was epic. I thought it's still one of the better reveals I think we've had in all of Star Wars from a visual standpoint. So a lot of great moments. Soul kind of losing his mind and, taking it to the edge. So, I mean, it's just a lot of great stuff encapsulated within that one episode. And that was the one episode when I thought about it was, what's the one thing I'm going to go, so I remember I was talking to people at work about whether they should watch this series or not. And this was around episode 3 or 4. And I was like, or it was around episode 3. I was like, you should probably wait until the very end. After Night, I was like, just go watch this episode right now. I mean, that's how I felt about it.
You don't need any additional context. Just go watch the episode.
Go watch the 4th one if you want the setup, which was an amazing reveal as well for
Sure.
Gliding down. But episode 5, from just a pure entertainment factor and a lot of the stuff that goes with it, it's just kind of the cream of the crop for the series so far.
Yeah. All right. We only got 2 final questions here. And this one's going to be hard because I'm going to ask you to basically rate your children. But if you're looking at the totality of all of the different live action television series that we've had so far, that's the wrong question. How do you rank the series among all the live action series? So in play here, we have Andor, Mando, Ahsoka, Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett. Ed, you're up. How would you rank these?
Can I separate Mando season 1 and 2 and put season 3 over here?
No,
because then like my A tier is Mando season 1 and 2 with Andor, then like Ahsoka is my B tier, and the C tier is like Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett, Mando season 3, and this.
No. Okay,
That's very complete. Like, even if it's
Yeah.
against the
Not
rules, it's quite a complete
acceptable.
rating.
it really is. I knew someone was going to ask this, and I knew it was going to be Ed. So I didn't want to give him out here because I mean, honestly, the book or Mando is done. Like, for all intents and purposes, it's over. We had 3 seasons. We're not getting any more. And so I'm trying to look at this as you're looking at the totality of the series itself.
3 seasons in a movie. 3 seasons in a movie.
Yeah. The dumbest title ever. Fred, what about you? How would you rank the series if you had to rank them?
Andor, Mando 1, Mando 2, Acolyte. I think Acolyte is vastly, vastly superior to Ahsoka for a lot of reasons. And I think maybe a lot of those reasons are I just love Ahsoka so much. And I feel very, as my children would say, frustrated with the Ahsoka series. But Acolyte, I thought the episodes that were good were so good that they are up there with like Andor episode 10, One Way Out. Like, they were so strong, but they were held. Whoa, that was a sigh. Lauren's got to go next.
Big statement. Big
Yeah.
statement.
That's bold. I'll go that way. I was really I brought it up a few times, the with Jackie, and she died. I thought that was a masterclass in Star Wars storytelling and cinematography in general. She falls and the reveal, and this is the best part about it. When that happened, and the stranger is there, like, who clearly did a lot of push-ups to pump up those triceps right before that scene was shot. My wife walked into the room and went, "Hello," like right
goodness,
there.
Yeah.
And like, I've watched it again, and it's so good. It's so strong. Those episodes were so strong, and that finale, like, warts and all, was just awesome. Like when Jonesy brought up the Jedi, good and evil, fighting, badass. Did you not notice the way Saul kept falling back and counter-striking and falling back? And it's like they were respecting that idea that use the Force for defense, never for attack. It was just so good. So those moments were like these bright lights amongst what otherwise would have been a mediocre at best series to me. So yeah, I'm gonna go. It's number 3 because I also think Mando 1 and 2 have to be one thing. So yeah, it's number 3.
Number 3. Where did you? I didn't hear Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett. Where did those land for you?
What are those? I
Okay.
don't know them.
No, fair enough.
I don't know her.
Jonesy, how about you?
Oh, let's see. I'll go from the bottom. So I think Book of Boba Fett is still last. I think Ahsoka is probably right above is above that one. I'm trying to think how I feel about Kenobi. It's been a while since I've watched Kenobi. The Acolyte kind of felt like Ahsoka in many ways for me. There's really cool lore elements to it. There's a lot of teases, but you don't always get to all of the end point that you want to get to. It felt like a total setup for another season. That fundamentally just felt dirty to me, and so it leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But having said that, as I think Acolyte probably sits in a firm 3, maybe how I'm feeling about Kenobi. Just some of the things that we got resolved from Kenobi felt good to have all of that material, so that might be coloring my opinion. But I think Andor and Mando are still clear 1 and 2s for me. I think the rest are pretty fair distance after that, but Acolyte's kind of there in the middle, flirting between Acolyte and Kenobi. Probably changes position based on how I feel that day.
Okay, no, that's fair. I think it's pretty close to where I'm at too, but that's no surprise since we've been doing this for years. Lauren, how about you? Where'd you land? How do you rank them?
Okay, so Kenobi's number 1, purely sentimental reasons. Like, you have Ewan and Hayden, they're gonna beat everything. I don't care what they're doing.
Yeah.
So Kenobi's number 1, Andor's
Prequel child
number...
here, by the way, folks. Sorry, prequel
Yes,
child, but yes, go on.
prequel child. Okay, so that's all that needs to be said about that. Andor's number 2. That's why I gasped when Fred compared it to One Way Out. I'm sorry, Fred, but yeah, Andor's god tier for me. And then other than that, so after Andor, I would say Mando, the good and the bad overall, I would say number 3. Ahsoka, number 4. Book of Boba Fett, after that, and then Acolyte at the very bottom. I
Very
didn't
bottom
like it.
tier.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, hey, it's like we've talked about. This is not a fair question, and you don't really see a lot of Star Wars folks, fans, shows ranking the movies and stuff, because for us, it's like, yeah, we're ranking them because someone has asked us to put a number to it. But when we really think about it, a lot of times this stuff is always at the top. We love almost everything about it. We love all the aspects of it. We love the lore, and so you're really talking about, if you were to rank other stuff in this is really 10. 9, 9.8, 9.7, 9.6. It's still up there, but we have to pick, right? So
what's funny is, like, even though, like, I don't know her, I've watched all those series like 3 times.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that just says something right there.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's all good. It's all Star Wars, and I love all of it.
And for the record, I have not rated any of those shows 9.6s and 9.8s.
No,
Albert.
I know what you're saying. What Up says this. I guess this is their ranking: Mando, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, Acolyte, Obi-Wan, Andor. So middle of the pack. He's got Andor at the bottom. That's shocking. I think that's actually pretty cool, though. Honestly, the Reader Reborn said, for me, the finale elevated significantly overall. And then their ranking is Kenobi, Acolyte, Ahsoka, Mando, and Fett. Mine is Andor. Shocker. I know that's probably not a shocker for anybody. So Andor's number 1. I have Ahsoka second for the same reason that Lauren's talking about the Kenobi being top tier. That's Rebels, and seeing live action and the exploration that we got there of the Force and Balin's skull and all that. That's just, I can't, it's hard not to rank that as number 2 for me. So I go Andor, Ahsoka. I got Mando 3rd, Acolyte 4th, Kenobi 5th, and Book of Boba Fett last. But for me, it is kind of like you're asking me to rank and pick my kids, which is much easier to do than pick your favorite Star Wars anything.
Yeah,
so.
but we all do it. So it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we're parents. You have to pick kids. That's how things stay fair. Brandon chimed in, said Andor, Ahsoka, Mando, Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett, Acolyte. So yeah, that's cool. I can see that. I respect that one. I like that he's got Ahsoka there in second. All right, last question before we get out of here. I'm gonna go around and ask everybody to rate the series on a scale of 1 to 10, and you guys can use half numbers if you'd like. Actually, you know what? Sorry, I skipped over one question. Let's talk about season 2 just very briefly. If we had to see a season 2. Do you want to see a season 2? And then what would you look forward to the most in season 2? Fred, go ahead.
I want to know what Vanestra was up to. That's what I want to know.
Okay.
And I love that, like, whole true romance vibe that you brought up, like with Osha and the stranger going out there and just lighting it up like Bonnie and Clyde style.
Exactly.
I would love to see that type of thing in Star Wars. Just 2 people that are madly in love with each other and rob a bank and make out on a big pile of money, but in space. That's what I want to see.
I don't know what trope that is. I think there is one out there somewhere.
It should be. If it's not, it's never been in Star Wars, though. Like in Dr. Aphra, they came close with her big bank robbery heist in like the
So close.
Yeah, so close. Yeah, they did some really cool, like, near do well stuff, but I think we need some more stuff like that in this, and I'd like to see it on the big screen.
All right, Jonesy, do you want a season 2?
Yeah, because I need to see what happens with Plagueis. I mean, I need to know where that story goes. Like, and they had so many open-ended items that the Star Wars fan in me just needs to know what the story is at this point, and not having it would feel like a disservice. Even though overall, if some of those threads weren't there, I'd probably say, it was kind of good for what we got, and move on from there. But yes, I think we kind of need it for some of these other story aspects.
Okay. Lauren, I know it's at the bottom of your list, but would you want a season 2? And if so, what would you be looking forward to the most?
I mean, I could take it or leave it, but I mean, if they do a season 2, I would be interested to see what happens with Plagueis. But I kind of agree with Jonesy. That would pretty much be the main thing that would keep me coming back.
Yeah. Ed?
I think they'd have to, like, rework the whole thing, right? Because they sold this on like some sort of mystery, and they can't really do that for a second season, right? Like, I don't know what, like, mystery they can pull out of their butts for season 2, and it would just kind of feel forced. It would just kind of have to be like, all right, these are just the adventures of the High Republic season 2.
Yeah.
Ed, I love you, because I think that kind of summarizes some of the frustration I have with the series or the season so far, is that it was touted that way. But the things that are the most interesting weren't that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did everybody chime in? Yeah. So
Yeah, at
I'm
least
looking.
once. Yeah.
Yeah, at least once. We'll go around again. I am for a season 2. I definitely want to see that. I am more interested, of course, in Kamir and Osha. I want to see what that relationship looks like. I love the Bonnie and Clyde analogy. That's probably your strongest of the night, Fred, just being honest here. I do definitely want to know more about Plagueis. I want to know about Vernestra Rowe. Is she going to tell the truth to Yoda? And what does that look like? How much are we going to see the beginning of the fall of the Jedi here? That really kind of opens themselves and exposes themselves to the dark side permeating even more than it already has. And what I had alluded to earlier was I just felt like having May and Osha at the same time in this series and kind of the jumping back and forth, it was a little distracting. I kept screwing up, honestly, personally, whenever we're talking about these characters, but it feels like that's been liberated now. I know they've alluded to that someday Osha is going to go find May, or May's going to find Osha. See, I'm still not clear who said what there, but that's probably going to happen at some point. But really, just kind of be able to have a season where it's just Osha, and we only have to focus on Osha, especially now in this moment where she's arguably going to be going through the greatest growth of her character ever, is very exciting. It's very intriguing. The only thing I would hope is that we do lean more into the dark side aspects of things. I felt this series was labeled as the Acolyte. It felt like it was a little bit more about the Jedi more than the dark side. And again, that's kind of going in with expectations and some of the expectations I had. But being able to really focus on the dark side of things and what does that look like? What does the rule of 2 look like in this time period? How are they interpreting it? What's Plagueis' angle here? Does he know Kamir? Does Kamir know who he is? Is he young? Is he old? There's a lot of stuff there that I really want to know more about from the dark side, because we've gotten the light side in droves over the years, and it's just an open field, honestly, of things that we get to learn and know more about. So that's the stuff I would hope to see in season 2. But honestly, given the subverted expectations we had going in this series, who knows? We don't really know what Leslie Hampton's going to do. Your point's well taken, Ed. They can't label it like they did before. It is going to be something new. It's going to have to be something different, given where the series ended or the season ended.
You know, the way you brought up like the stranger's journey, wouldn't it be amazing, like really amazing, if somehow the Bendu was involved?
Oh my goodness.
Wouldn't that just be the best thing ever?
Yeah.
Oh,
I did not expect that's where that was going. But
I love the Bendu.
You've
I mean,
not
you
been
say
watching
Bendu,
these-
and I'm interested.
You-
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tom Baker does the voice and everything. Come on.
How do I mute this guy? You know, if you've been watching the shows with Fred, this was like coming. He's
That's why I burst out laughing, because I
signaled this
should have
years
seen where
ago.
that was going.
episodes ago. He threw this out there and just keeps playing the same sad violin. All right, last question.
Rita Reborn did make a good comment, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
He said definitely season 2. Star Wars season 2s are usually a big step up. He referenced Rebels and Mando and some others as well.
Yeah, sorry.
Clone Wars as well. Yeah, Bad Batch.
Quickly, Cube Dube connection to other witches in Dathomir, Ahsoka, and Thrawn. I think maybe that's for season 2. I'm not sure. All right, last question. This time, I promise. I want to know on a scale of 1 to 10, if you had to rate the series. You can use half numbers as well. Where does your score land? And then give us any kind of final impressions. This will be the last opportunity you have to talk about anything, unless you want to bring up Bendu or RoboCop or whatever else. Jonesy, we'll start it back up at the top. Go ahead, sir. What's your ranking of the series?
I'll go 6.5.
6.5. Final. Anything else you want to add? Final impressions, thoughts on the series?
No, I mean, we've been doing this ad nauseum for several weeks, so I think a lot of great moments. I think in the series, a lot of things to think about and talk about. A lot of inconsistencies, though, is what's really dragging that number down, I think, and also what the payoff was at the end of it. So those are the things I think that were not really working. I like Rita Reborn's comment, though, that a season 2 could be a lot more focused and maybe have more direction, which this one at times felt like it was sputtering a little bit, trying to tell one story but then flirting with another one at the same time.
Good.
I use the word flirting pretty intentionally.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was a lot of Star Wars sex with all the hand touching that was happening in this series. Lauren, how about you? Final rating, thoughts, impressions?
I'll give it a 3.
Wow.
The first. So
You gave her the option to go to a 1, so come on.
I'm
I
gonna
know.
explain. Yeah, I didn't do a 1 because before everybody died, I was super into it. But once everybody died, I didn't care anymore. And I do have to add the caveat that that is typical for me. If a bunch of characters are killed off, especially if they're killed off in the same episode, I do not care anymore.
That's fair. We know
Yeah.
you. Yes.
So I hate that so much, regardless of the show, and that's just kind of like a personal taste thing. So I can recognize that, like, once that happened, I started noticing and complaining about things that I usually would just let slide and not worry about and not nitpick. So my personal taste definitely factors into that quite a bit. So it's a very biased rating. I recognize that.
Well, it's your opinion, and that's what we were looking for. So I love the
Yeah.
diversity. Honestly, I think we've had a lot of diversity here tonight on many of the questions. But Ed, scale of 1 to 10, and final thoughts, impressions on the series.
I'll give it a 6.5, like Jonesy. That's still a fresh rating, right? Like if we're going Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be fresh.
Still fresh. It's just at the bottom of fresh. I think the one of the things for me that kind of hurt the Acolyte wasn't necessarily Acolyte, but like all the other shows that have come out in the last few weeks that has been competing for my attention as well. Because like House of the Dragon has come out, around the same time. The Boys came out around the same time. The Bear came out around the same time. And I've liked all of those shows better than the Acolyte for the last few weeks. So if it's something that's just been competing for my attention, it's been those things. And the Acolyte's been like, oh, right, I should probably watch that. We might have to do a podcast.
That's a very astute observation. And I don't think it's something, we get so wrapped up in our bubble of Star Wars talk with all the people that we know and love and what's all we think about day and night. And we forget there are normal people like yourself out there who actually watch other things as well. And so that's not lost on me. I get that. And I've seen that feedback a lot on Twitter and social media. People saying that, hey, this, if you were to compare this to other stuff, I'm not spending as much time. I'm watching it's a one and done kind of thing. Whereas I'm going back and I'm analyzing things, and I'm starting to sign up for podcasts on these different other series because I just want to know more because they're that intriguing and that interesting. That's a very good point, especially context. I guess the time in which some of this stuff is released certainly does matter, and how well some of these series do. So yeah, good point. Fred, how about you?
I'll give it a 6, an even 6. And if it wasn't for episodes 5 and the finale, it would be a 3. So, yeah, 6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
And though you had that rank, though, you had this ranked what, number 2?
No, number 3.
Number 3. Okay. Is that line with your ranking? Align with your ranking, you think?
Yeah. Whoa, my chair just broke.
All right. Well, all right. I gave this, I think I'm the highest. I ranked it a 7.5. I was teetering on 7, then I was thinking about maybe it's an 8, but then I was like, no, you know what? It could have been higher for all the, we've already talked a lot about what didn't work on it, but I did enjoy it. Like, I don't know that I would have walked away from the series or I'm walking away from the series and telling people don't go watch it. That's not the case. I think people have the benefit of seeing the whole series in one sitting, which I think probably does well. I've only seen literally 2 people that had held off and wanted to watch the entire, and these are Star Wars fans, right? People that really have one's a Star Wars creator, they create content. And the other person is just kind of like a Star Wars fan. They listen to podcasts, they watch YouTube videos, but they couldn't recite lines or necessarily name characters, if that makes sense. But they were like over the moon about the series. And so you've got 2 different sides of the coin. But I think overall, people there's a real benefit from being able to watch the series in one sitting now, as opposed to going week by week and getting wrapped up in all the discourse and that we've unfortunately had to live through here. But at 7.5, I love the premise of the series. On paper, that pitch that Leslie Headland put out there, I get why it was so attractive and why she had people really buzzing about this, because on paper it looks amazing. The execution on the writing was kind of hit or miss at times. I think I had questions about why some of the characters did some of the things they did, but I was able to kind of just let that slide and not think too much about it. But then the highs were definitely big highs for me, like the combats and some of the characters, the supporting characters, Saul as a main character. All of that is what elevated it for me to, from just kind of average in the 5 or 6 range to a 7.5. So I enjoyed the series and definitely would recommend it to anybody who is not interested. Oh, you did the average of 5.9. Wow, I'm really bringing that up there, huh?
Yeah, you.
Well, actually, it's Lauren bringing it down more than me bringing it up.
Whoa, man! It'll be glass half empty.
Well,
Negative
she's kind of
Nancy.
3. Like, that's hard to bring
Yeah.
up.
Wasn't Fred's a 3?
I said a 3 if it wasn't for those 2 episodes. And then I
okay.
give it a 6
Yeah.
total. So I'm like
Mine was a
right on
true
the
3.
average.
Yeah.
Which shows you how much he liked those 2 episodes.
I am
Yeah, right,
truly
yeah.
mediocre, just like all of my teachers said. So I'm perfect, right in the middle.
Yeah. I don't know if that was really what she said, but yeah. We'll end the show there. Again, this has been a lot of fun. Honestly, I was so excited just to get everybody on here to kind of talk because we all have different personalities. We come from different types of backgrounds, and I know we had varying opinions on a lot of this stuff, which I think certainly came out tonight as we were talking about this. But Jonesy, before you get out of here, I know you want to say thank you to a number of folks who were very active in the chat, and I do apologize I wasn't able to get to all of it. We were trying to stick to an hour and 30, and I'm already 10 minutes over.
Yeah, and real quick, I think on the ratings, a lot of folks in the chat are in that 6 range. I think some bubbled up to a 7. We've had some in the 4 or 5, so maybe one in the just below a 4. So again, kind of in that middle range. So I think our representation seems to be a representation of some of the folks that shared their things in the chat. Speaking of the people in the chat, special thank you to Brian, Skywalker's Academy, Steph, Sky, My Star Wars Guys, Reader Reborn, What Up versus CPU, Alex, Tom, Tress7, The Crawling Chaos, Jorge, Esteban, Adrian, Brandon, Andrew, Cube Dude. If I missed anyone, my apologies. Thank you all for coming out. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. So you can see all of our great content. Lauren's stuff over on Jedi Novel Archive. Ed and Fred, you can see them on the Way Station. Of course, Albert and I doing all the other stuff. And if you're curious about Patreon as well, CantinaCast.com/Patreon. Everything you invest in the show, we invest into the show. So we certainly appreciate your support there. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Also, before we get out of here, Jonesy and I have not, and really everybody here, we've not taken a break since like December or November of last year. So we're going to take about a 2-week break and just go see our families and do things that we normally don't get to do because we're not, we're usually doing show prep. So we'll take a public break, but if you're a Patreon member, we owe you some content and we're certainly going to deliver on that. We've got some things lined up. Jonesy's already banged out a number of episodes that we can do that are follow-up to the Acolyte, where we'll kind of talk more in depth on some of the conversations we've had tonight and certainly some of the things that we left off with this series. So as a Patreon member, you'll still continue to get content, but we are going to break just for a little bit on the public shows. And then also Lauren and I have a bunch of High Republic stuff still coming towards you, whether it's the comics, both series, High Republic Adventures, the High Republic mainstream comic, and then we have Living Force, which I'm still dying to talk about because it's a fun book to discuss. Living Force, Temptation of the Force. We're going to talk about Temptation of the Force.
I got excited for a second.
I know. No, we're not going back to that one. Sorry. We already did our show on that
Maybe
one.
someday.
Maybe someday we'll come back and do another one.
You were waiting for me to finish the book, so I'm done with the book. You can now commence with your review.
Yeah, but we'll talk about Temptation of the Force and all the ships and stuff that's happening there, and I don't mean spaceships. So, all right, guys, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you guys for being a part of all of the episodes we did throughout the series. And certainly on behalf of myself, Jonesy, Lauren, Ed, and Fred, you guys have a good night, and we'll see you all here very soon.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.